1 month in, Israel's ceasefire with Hamas is looking increasingly fragile. In the north as well, with Lebanon, we are seeing renewed airstrikes on Hezbollah military targets, and many are accusing Israel, particularly from the mainstream media, of having breached its agreements and threatening to throw the region into a state of total war. This evening on Behind the Headlines, we're going to be asking the question, very important question, is Israel really breaking its ceasefire agreements? I'm Regan King, and joined by my good friend and co-host for this evening, Tim Gutmann, and we want to apologize for Simon. He is currently working at the Christian Media Summit, which is being held in Jerusalem. So I am very sure he's going to have some stories for us, God willing, next week or the week after. And we look forward to welcoming Simon back. But Tim, it's you and me this evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Great. I think this is the first show I've done just with yourself, Regan.
It is indeed. Yeah.
It's great to be here, and also this is a. It's been such an intense 2 years since the war, and it's since the ceasefire as well. There's so much happening, so much misinformation. We're used to this now. We've seen it. We've seen it in the most blatant way, such deception, and it's so important to talk about these things. And we as believers as well, that we have the right knowledge and truth, not just that we can counter it when we're talking to people, but so we can pray into it and see what God is doing.
I imagine this hits you on a daily basis as well. I mean, we're right in central London, Rachel and myself, and I was at Euston recently, just the other week, and there was this trail of people. It was after the ceasefire, okay, trail of people outside friend's house in Euston. And they had these posters and these banners. They've changed it slightly now. For a while it was ceasefire now. And they can't really do that because we do actually have a ceasefire now, okay? So now they've remodeled it, and it's not as snappy, it's not as eloquent or as simple as ceasefire now. Everyone's saying whatever they want to say. Something about justice or peace for Palestinians was their main focus. Anyway, I approached one of the obviously lead people of it, who was a bit separated from the rest of the group and was approaching people, giving out their literature. And I said, well, so what's this then? Knowing what this was then, but I was like, and she said, she was actually quite silent at first and just gave me the literature, and I had a look at it and said, could you tell me a little bit about your agenda? She said, our agenda is peace and justice for Palestinians. And I responded, just Palestinians, not Israelis? And there was, right after that, a good bit of stuttering and stammering around. Well, Israel is the aggressor. I said, okay, well, how did it all start? And so we had a little bit of a discussion of history and stuff. And she said, well, in this current stage, regardless of the history, so we're changing the goalpost. We're moving everything around a little bit. We've changed the whole game, actually. And she says, well, Israel has broken the ceasefire. I said, well, there's a ceasefire now. No, Israel has broken the ceasefire. And we started having this conversation about it, and it was clear that, it wasn't going anywhere. I think she was getting a bit frustrated and wasn't able to have a debate, and so just blessed her and walked on. Tim, is Israel breaking the ceasefire?
I mean, clearly not. I think Israel is the only one of the two parties upholding their end of the ceasefire. What we'll see is that Hamas has constantly been breaking their side of the agreement, and have been, for example, not just delaying the return of the hostages, of the bodies particularly, giving, again, we had this before, if you remember, months back, when they gave the wrong remains, the remains of someone else. They did that again, they tried that. We have drone footage of them reburying a body and pretending to dig it up.
Absolutely shocking stuff.
We've had them attacking IDF soldiers. So they are literally trying to break the ceasefire. And just on your point there, it's crazy that point you made was so key. That ceasefire now. There is a ceasefire, and they still march the following Saturday. Do you remember that?
It's not enough.
And they come out from under their rocks and they're saying so blatantly, we had this doctor and we have others saying, we don't want two states. We want it all. We don't want. This is about Israel. This is about the Jewish people being in their land. It's spiritual, and of course as well. You'll recall recently about President Trump, for example. He's threatened or he's warned Islamists in Nigeria to leave them alone.
Correct.
What is this obsession? Why, if you're such humanitarians and you pride yourself on being such great people, what about the Sudanese, the Nigerians, the Mozambiques, the Congolese? What about the suffering that goes on in all over the world in other war zones? And it's just this, I mean, they really are showing their colours.
They truly are. And, you know, you've mentioned those nations there. Watch us on Revelation TV. We talk about those nations. We care about those nations. What's going on in Sudan, what's going on in Nigeria, absolutely horrifying. Mozambique, across the board. But there's a common denominator. In almost every single place, there's a common denominator, and it is radical Islamism. And so it's the same war. It's the same conflict, essentially. It's the same spirit that's at work. It's fundamentally demonic. But we're going to be talking about this past month and giving a little bit of a breakdown here on Behind the Headlines this evening as to what's transpired since then. First, though, I think it'd be good to just remind ourselves of the immediate emotions from the streets of Jerusalem, literally within hours of Hamas saying they were willing to reconsider their previous refusal concerning a ceasefire deal. I was out in Jerusalem, and as soon as I heard, I thought I need to talk with people. I need to engage people and see what's going on and what their feeling is. And the love for and the desire for peace and the just sense that, okay, we're about to welcome our hostages home, we're about to be able to give our dead a decent, honorable burial, was such a prevalent, tangible element in the conversations I had.
Saturday, the 4th of October, 2025. Jerusalem streets are relatively empty as Shabbat ends, with many people having only just found out, some not yet having even heard, that the war may soon be over and the hostages may be coming home.
We live here in Jerusalem. We are Jewish Israelis, and we heard the news from yesterday night. And we hope with all over, with the entire people, we hope we will see our hostages soon, as soon as possible. We hope the war will end soon. We want this country, this land, go back to normal, to peace, to prosperity. This is it. We just want to everything, this horrible event to end.
Nearly 2 years after the horrifying events of 7th of October 2023, the streets of Jerusalem show a sense of cautious optimism. However, very few people are willing to speak to camera or be recorded, much of it rooted in a deep distrust of British media outlets and a fear that their words might be distorted or misconstrued. A general sense of war weariness prevails, with a desire for peace prevalent among each individual spoken with. The joy at the possibility of the hostages returning, tempered with the grief of the catastrophic losses experienced within Israel of family, friends, belongings, and an economy that is struggling, seeing a rise in homelessness and begging on the streets. Many express particular gratitude to President Trump and his plan.
Our heart is really heavy. We are walking in heavy hearts in Israel, all the people. We have 48 brothers and sisters there. It's not a biologic connection, but it's our people. It's our people, and everybody here feel like this. And we are struggling to bring back people that we have never met, but we feel that until they are not returning, we can't go back to normal life. It's simple as that. Every time that there's a new deal coming up, it's really like hope. But also those 2 years, every time there were
plans, and then a big disappointment and huge pain. So we're really like holding up our hope that it's gonna happen. That's the feeling.
We're all here in Israel, waiting to hear that it's going well. We are really, really, really looking forward to an agreement that will bring home back our brothers and sisters. That we are so waiting for them, almost 2 years, and we are so waiting to end this war and to open a new
Period of time.
yeah.
A demonstration in support of the hostages gathered outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence on Saturday night with optimism cautiously expressed through tears of grief and pent-up frustration. A relative of twin hostages, Gali and Ziv Berman, still held in Gaza, spoke with me about his own experience of the 7th of October and his hopes.
From Kfar Aza, from Kibbutz Kfar Aza, a kibbutz, a village that suffered a lot of death. They hit us hard. They kidnapped two of my cousins, Gali and Ziv Berman. I was at my partner's house. I saw the messages in WhatsApp. People say they shot me, they take me. They here in my apartment, help me, I'm dying. I saw all of this in WhatsApp after they kidnapped Gali and Ziv. They both were missing for 11 days. I opened the Telegram to see anything that can help us understand what happened to them. I think horrible videos, photos of Hamas kills innocent people in their beds, in their house. They take people from the road. The Gaza Strip is the most beautiful area in Israel. They color it all in red, in blood. They kidnap a lot of people. They kill everyone that they saw. And I see all of this in WhatsApp, Telegram. I called the police. They didn't answer 7 times. I call our Ravshatz, the first responder leader. After 3 days, I understand that he didn't answer my calls because he gets murdered at 7 a.m. Our first response team fight with courage. They were 12 against 600. Unbelievable. We lost a lot of people in Kfar Aza. 64. They kidnapped almost 20. Two of them still in captivity, Gali and Ziv Berman. I'm here fight for them, for our community, for our country. I believe the situation will end soon. My feeling in this day, it's complicated. I'm feeling with hope that this nightmare will end soon. I'm grateful to Donald Trump for this solution to the situation. I want my family home. I miss them so much. We fight for them every single day. We do interviews. We talk with a lot of people. We want them back home after 2 hard years.
Vice President of Operations at the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, Richard Vanderbeek, gave his thoughts.
This hopefully will be the end. My prayer is that actually we'll be successful and that the hostages will be released and that we'll get them back, that this country will go through a time of peace actually. We really, after 2 years, this country is exhausted. They're really, really tired. And many of us are seeking, well, Lord, is this the end? Can we go into a new time now of peace? We're hoping and praying that it will go through, but we're also very clear it might not happen. But we do pray that we'll get our hostages back, and this will actually be the end of this stage of the war. So that is my prayer. If you can please pray for the Lord's will to happen at this time.
2 years after the Feast of Tabernacles ended and the horror of October 7th, could it actually be that the hostages will return home in time for Sukkot? I'm Regan King, reporting from Jerusalem. I'm Israel Chai.
And thanks to you, Regan, for that excellent report. And it must be so surreal being there at that time, and really powerful to listen
Incredible.
to. An important and key scripture, I think, for us as believers, and a scripture we'll look at today is Isaiah 41. Comfort, comfort my people, says the Lord. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry out to her that her warfare is ended. How powerful and apt.
Well, I mean, this was the verse that first came to mind. And yes, there's context, and this has a very particular context, but I thought, you know, God's word, as we hear it, as we soak in it, it applies to a range of situations, not only the immediate situation in which it was uttered and spoken, and not even only the spiritual situation, because we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and its peace physically will fully come when it knows full spiritual peace, right? And so I was meditating on this and thinking through this and thought, one day, this full experience of comfort will occur when it will be that her warfare is ended. And this will not just be a ceasefire that's temporary, but there'll be total peace. Not just peace when there is no peace, but there will be a day of complete comfort when our Lord and Savior reigns again from Jerusalem, when his feet stand again on the Mount of Olives. And so, you know, we can see, and it was so, seeing it, Tim, just the way in which people relaxed and seemed comforted and seemed hopeful that the hostages were coming home, that this ceasefire deal might be impacted. Tears of joy mingled with the weight of grief from the past couple of years, and just the sense of, is it too good to be true? All of that was there, and I just had comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her, her warfare is ended. And I thought, it's not yet ended, but this is a start, and it's a sign, and it's a foretaste of what it will be like when that full and complete peace comes.
That's right, and I don't think we have this understanding, I think, in the West of the context of this. What happened on October the 7th, it affected everybody in Israel. In fact, it affected Jewish people all over the world, and their allies like ourselves. The intensity and the pain and the heartbreak, the trauma, the fighting on whether they're protesting in London or counter-protesting, whether they're, writing and advocating, or whether they're, fighting in the media, on social media. Everybody's been so involved. It's been so traumatic. It's been so emotionally, spiritually draining. And then, so it hit me, for example, Regan, I probably like yourself, I was praying for the hostages daily, and then suddenly I woke up to pray, Lord, bring them home, and I realized, well, all the living hostages are home, and it was quite incredible, and I was like praising Jesus, this is amazing. But like you say, war's not ended yet.
Yeah.
The Bible does talk about, there are other scriptures, in the ESV it talks about God making a full end of their enemies.
Correct, yeah.
And we of course have the messianic, the second coming prophecies concerning Jesus' kingdom, when swords will be turned into plowshares, etc. But for now, this is important time of recovery, of resting from this trauma.
Absolutely, it is. It's an important season, but the ceasefire is fragile.
Yeah,
and I think we just have to recognize that. We'll walk through the month of October. Okay, we're here in November now. Let's walk through the month of October and do a little bit of a recap of what's happened. On the 4th of October, I wake up, I go downstairs, and I'm encountered by this Israeli gentleman and his kids in the lobby of the High Rabbin hostel, and he just initiates this conversation, and there's clearly emotion in his voice. He was immensely grateful that we were there, and it was really a beautiful conversation. But I was thinking, even though knowing Israelis, I was a little taken aback by just how emotional he was. And then he said, "Have you heard the news?" I'm like, I've not heard the news. I've not seen it yet. But there was a moment that was like, this could be really good or this could be really bad. I said, no, I've not heard the news. And he said, a little overstated, but the war's over. Hamas says they're happy to talk. And the hostages are coming home. And I thought, immediately I just felt incredible. This is, I can scarcely believe it. Now, when it actually happened, that was when it was like, it's very surreal, almost as surreal as what happened and the horrors of the 7th of October, just that sense of all of the living hostages are back. It was, and what's more, a couple more than we actually thought were alive. While there, people were saying, we only think 18 are alive, and there were 20.
That's right.
So the 9th of October, cabinet ministers in Israel approved the preliminary ceasefire deal with Hamas in Gaza. It was brokered by mediators, including the U.S. being the primary mediator. Of course, Donald Trump, very instrumental in that. We did a full program breaking down all of the terms of that ceasefire. You can go back and watch that on demand. But the initial steps were very clear. The release of all hostages, living and dead, within a 72-hour period, which would then also see the release of particular Palestinian prisoners and a halt to large-scale Israeli bombardments and partial Israeli troop withdrawal. The terms were very clear.
That's right. And the key there, I think you highlighted, is that 72-hour window. Israel, the IDF, straight away we withdrew to that. It was the yellow line, wasn't it?
Correct, yeah, that's what they're calling it, yeah.
They withdrew to their lines and they upheld their side, but straight away that's the key point, the 72-hour window. And, you know, we can see, I mean, there are still bodies in Gaza now. That 72-hour.
Almost a month.
A month.
After the 72 hours expired.
That's right.
Right?
And the tricks and the lies and the deceit, but yeah.
So and we're going to be hearing a little bit of that. Hamas initially, we have to say, breached the ceasefire deal almost from the beginning. Okay, there was concern that they wouldn't be returning all of the living hostages within that 72-hour period. Thankfully, they did, just on time. Last possible moments, we saw the last of those living hostages come into Israeli hands, and it was a moment of great joy and celebration for all of those family members. Also one of deep pain for those who were maybe hoping against hope that their child, their loved one, might be numbered among those living, and the realization of death setting in for those who had already, in many cases, been presumed dead. A day mingled with joy and tears. 13th of October, all of the living Israeli hostages held by Hamas were reported released under the terms of the deal. Now, the issue is that there are still bodies of dead hostages, and there has been this continual drip feed of information from Hamas since that time. There are still more than 10 hostages held in Gaza.
That's right. Well, I think as of this moment, there's 8. I think
there's 8 now. Yeah.
But what's been happening is, you know, they've said straight away, they were saying, well, they're really hard to find, these bodies, and they were blaming Israel, they're under rubble, blah, blah, blah. Israel said, we have intelligence, we can tell you where they are, you know. But straight away, there was an attempt to disrupt or deceive. There are constant games being played, as we'll see, but even now, a month later, still 8 bodies remain in Gaza, which is a breaking of the ceasefire agreement of that 72 hours.
Yeah, inarguably. So this was the breakdown of when we see the bodies released. Hamas committed to releasing all remaining Israeli hostages and who were deceased. They said it's going to take time. Israel was, I think, Tim, quite forbearing, quite patient, saying, okay, it's not ideal, this is a breach, but there was some acceptance that it could be a little complicated. They only released 4 initially. They only found and gave 4 initially. Right. Then there was this drip feed of information. It seems to be like, well, what's going to happen? There were 7 of the 28 that had been reportedly returned. But as you noted earlier, there was one body that was given that did not belong to a hostage. Who that individual was, we don't know. Likely someone in Gaza, perhaps a Hamas terrorist, perhaps someone who was caught up in the conflict, but we've not found out who that individual was. Hamas didn't do due diligence in their identification and in this process. So that's obviously mentally and emotionally very jarring for Israel as well. Of course. It's a betrayal. As you said earlier, we can remember one of the most disgusting moments from Hamas in the past couple of years was the treatment of the Bybas family, Ofir and Ariel, and their dear mother. And that just, I think, shook so many people to their core. But to return the wrong body in that scenario.
I mean, let's remember, we're dealing with the most evil people imaginable. I mean, you have the Nazis, but these guys were on another level, Hamas. I mean, they were, where the Nazis were struggling to do the atrocities they did and would have to, oftentimes they were drinking to numb what was going on, or, they couldn't handle what they were doing. Hamas, these terrorists were ringing their parents excited. They reveled in it. They loved what they were doing, the violence, the extremity. And actually mentioning the Bybas babies, I mean, it's so evil. So what they did to those babies, so this is what they've done. And a lot of that was psychological warfare. They were trying to hurt Israelis and the Jewish people around the world even more. They were messing about with the hostages. Do you remember those absolutely wicked and horrific ceremonies when they were handing over the hostages? Yep. And you'll remember as well, handing over the wrong bones and all of this. We're dealing with the sickest people. Yeah. We have to remember that, because so many, actually too many in the West, they almost advocate for Hamas. Mm-hmm. They take their word as read, including some of our some of our mainstream media. Yeah. They'll take their word as read. And when Israel has a comment, they'll put it in, I mean, this is a common thing, they'll put it in speech marks. Right. But then they'll just quote, according to the Hamas Ministry of Health, 75 million have died. That's an exaggeration, but you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a grim situation. And now on the 30th of October, 2 more bodies were handed over, Amiram Cooper and Sahar Baruch. And viewers will remember the Rachel Weeping event that we broadcast throughout October. You'll remember that Sahar Baruch was one of those young men whose mothers we had the privilege of visiting and interviewing, and how grave her situation was and is truly, to lose 2 sons in the same day, to lose your parents in the same day, to lose relatives close, lost so much. So you'll want to pray, I know, for those women once more. Oz Daniel, his body remains in Gaza. But to see these individuals returning and to see the respect and the dignified burial that they're being able to be given, there's the ability to rejoice in that. There's also a great deal of consternation. And there are Israelis who feel that more needs to be done to try to pressure Hamas, but at the same time that more is going to be getting Israel flack, as it already is getting. Hamas is breaking and breaching the ceasefire terms and has done continually every day since those 72 hours expired, with much forbearance from Israel. But the issue, Tim, is not only the delay of these bodies being returned, there are other issues as well.
That's right. There's like we said, they were messing about, they were deceiving, they were pretending to dig up bodies, they were actually attacking IDF units. We've seen that. Yeah. There were so many instances where they were breaching the ceasefire. All of this is part of their game, by the way. Let's just be straight. Everything they've been doing, all of their misinformation, everything about the whole propaganda arm of Hamas, which gets so much airplay in the West, it's about these ancient anti-Semitic tropes that Israel is these child killers, that Israel is oppressing the Palestinians, that Israel is the usurper, Israel is the occupier, the colonial power. However, this is obviously, and so clearly, if you're a believer, satanic deception, because Israel is the Jewish people, that is their homeland.
Yeah.
The Jewish people take more care to avoid civilian casualty and to avoid the death of, especially in this situation where they're hiding in schools and they're putting their lockets in homes and tunnels underneath hospitals. I mean, Israel has done more, and yet all of this deception, all of these games, Hamas says, and now for Israel to be accused of breaking the ceasefire, are we deliberately deluded? Are we deliberately blind, or are we trying to accuse Israel blatantly because of hate? You cannot be that deluded to believe Hamas are innocent and Israel is the breaking of the ceasefire.
Well, here's what's going on. There were 3 airstrikes that were carried out in response to Hamas terrorists violating the ceasefire, carrying out an attack against IDF forces east to the Yellow Line, which was an area under Israeli control. Now, we have seen IDF attacked. We have seen multiple IDF soldiers killed since this ceasefire. They have the right and they have the might to respond to those situations. The Henry Jackson Society Executive Director, Dr. Alan Mendoza, has commented that Hamas was punished by Israel for breaches in the agreement it had committed. This is entirely uncontroversial and would be the legitimate response to any similar malfactor in any deal anywhere. The only reason that anyone is crying about it is because Israel is involved. This is a clear breach. Now, there's some complication in that it's believed that there are multiple Hamas terrorists who are actually embedded in central Rafah, and the IDF are in a difficult situation here because those guys are behind enemy lines and they've allegedly been trapped there since the ceasefire. They're wanting to come out, apparently, but if they are deemed over in Israel territory, it's a problem. So there's a little bit of a standoff that's been occurring in Rafah over this as well.
Yeah. Benjamin Netanyahu, he was speaking at a reservist event conference. Anyway, 2 interesting points, well, really key points. He said in the past, our ethos was all about containing and, trying to prevent, but now he's talking about a new ethos for Israel emerging from the 7th of October, where Israel has emerged as the key power in the Middle East. I think there's no denying that. I think what the enemy meant for harm, God's used for good. He's taken care of his people. He's done amazing things against not just Hamas, but Hezbollah, the Houthis. In Syria, incredible. In Iraq, the IRGC. I mean, Israel has emerged. So he's saying we need a different ethos, one that is more proactive. In other words, where in the past they were reducing the size of their reservists, they're talking about having a larger force, as they've learned from the 7th of October. This is needed. And in that ethos, in that mindset, in that same speech, Benjamin Netanyahu said, anybody in our zone, in the yellow zone, any Hamas fighters, we will be eliminating them. They will be eliminated because anyone else this happened to, Regan, this is true. If this happened to us, we would have the backing of the world to finish those terrorists. But straight away, the pressure's on Israel. Genocide, apartheid, murdering children, all of that anti-Semitic stuff. So Israel's constantly having this pressure not to finish the job. Well, I don't think there will be any mercy for anyone in those yellow zones.
Well, they're operating in an underground space in the heart of Rafah, according to Israeli media reports, in an area under high operational control, deep in Rafah, not on the border, in the yellow line. The assessment is that terrorists are hiding inside the underground because the underground network is extremely extensive. They've destroyed so much of it. But remember, this network was more comprehensive and more expansive than the London Underground network. What a web. What a web. So during the operation to clear the underground, the terrorists came out and opened fire with anti-tank guns, snipers, and an assault, which raises the assessment that a kidnapping attempt was made. Okay, so the old habits die hard. Let's take another hostage and let's, they've lost every bargaining chip, really.
Exactly.
Right, this is the issue. They need, whoever was behind the strategy of their ceasefire, they lost every bargaining chip. Yeah. There's no bargaining chip they have that's living now. And the reality is the condition of the deceased tragically is such as now the psychological warfare is occurring even more. They're returning body parts of hostages who've previously been released.
That's right.
That's psychological and emotional abuse in this context on a massive scale. So distressing for the family who have laid their loved ones to rest and sought to honor them. It's just a total desecration. But the question has arisen, was this a planned attack by Hamas, or were the terrorists responding to the activity that was going on in that region by the IDF? Either way, the ceasefire is being reported by some to have totally collapsed as a result. The IDF is responding with fire from the air and from the ground, and the Minister of Defense is convening consultations on expanding not only in the Rafah area. Who was the catalyst to this kicking off again?
That's right, Hamas, as always. You know, Israel. Let's not forget, I mean, the bigger picture here, Israel has desperately wanted peace and has given so much for peace. They even pulled out, I mean, can we please remember they completely pulled out of Gaza in 2005. I mean, what else could they do for peace? And again, they're keeping to this peace agreement. And again, Hamas is pushing it, It's like they want Israel to look like they're breaking it. They want to constantly, there's this constant lie, deception, propaganda. I mean, don't forget that their father is the devil, who's the father of lies. It's all lies. Hamas denied, by the way, according to them, they denied any involvement in the shooting, saying they affirm it has no connection to the shooting in Rafah and affirming its commitment to the ceasefire. But the terror group said it would postpone the release of further hostages following the latest airstrikes, and it's understood that Israel will review the situation after the strikes. Israel will also take further control of Gaza beyond the yellow line. According to a source familiar with the matter, the yellow line marks the boundary where the IDF retreated to after signing the first stage. And the Telegraph was told that Mr. Netanyahu has discussed the expansion of military control with senior US officials in order to coordinate the move. So obviously tensions are very high, and tensions are high in Israel after the remains of a hostage returned, as you said, by the terror group 2 years ago were exactly the same. What they tried to release more of those body parts.
But think about it for a minute, Tim, though. This isn't actually the scale of this. I just want for people to set in, okay? We know that the hostages were brutalized in horrible ways. We remember that the bodies of the Baibes family were, they said, they died in an Israeli airstrike. Post-mortem showed that they had been battered and beaten up. Post, death, they had taken the bodies and had abused them and had beaten them and had thrown rocks and stuff at them to make it look like that. Video footage, one of those videos that you were referring to from a drone, showed Hamas throwing a hostage body off of a building, then burying it. And then, this is part of their depraved scheme, okay? This is how they operate. The body parts of this individual, Ofir Tzarfati, right? He had been killed. Okay, his body was recovered from Gaza 2 years ago. 2 years ago. On more body parts of his were recovered in March 2024. Okay, his body was recovered in November 2023, early on, within a month or so. In March 2024, his family received additional remains for burial. The third time, this is the third time they've received some remains of Ofir.
Incredible.
What is going on? You know, yes, war is brutal and stuff, but this is particularly grim. They said that this is the third time we have been forced to open Ofir's grave and rebury our son. It's psychological abuse on a horrific scale. Netanyahu and others are saying that time is running out and patience is extremely thin. U.S. negotiators are warning against further military action by Israel, but Israel has already clarified it will do as it sees fit. It can stand with or without U.S. support. It's already proven to have done so.
That's right, and just following the strikes, I'll recall that President Trump said, well, Israel has a right to do this because Hamas have broken the ceasefire.
Rubio as well said that.
And Rubio said that as well. And they said, you know, this is what anyone would do. This is what's expected. You know, this is, Israel is responding to a breach by Hamas. And I'll note this as well, even the Red Cross, and I say even because I remember I remember demonstrating with our Israeli and Jewish friends at the Red Cross because of their lack of action or seeming concern or statements or pressure on Hamas to actually visit the hostages. But even the Red Cross have come out and hitting out at Hamas because of the footage showing the staged recovery that you mentioned of the deceased Israeli remains and putting that body bag in the hole. I mean, even the Red Cross has called Hamas out for this, and Israel has released videos proving that that's what they're doing.
They filmed their discovery of the body. It's just, you know, there's this expression you know that you see of Pallywood.
That's right, yeah.
You know, is how it's called, and it is quite. Anything that is said, you just have to question: is this true?
Absolutely.
Because almost always it's not. How many times have we been told that the last remaining functioning hospital in Gaza has been bombed or is about to be destroyed?
Oh my goodness.
Right, and then we read in another report, hold on, this hospital sounds like it's functioning. This hospital sounds like it's functioning. And you know, yes, I'm sure there's challenges, by all means, I'm sure, but the whole narrative is completely distorted and shrouded by lies. Again, why? Ideologically, you have to understand, viewer, that Islam praises Allah for being the greatest deceiver. This is part of it. When you have your God and you are seeking to worship and follow in that God's steps, and your God you praise for being the greatest of deceivers, you are not going to have a problem with deception. And so you have al-taqiyya, which is the process through which Muslims can lie to others for the sake of reconciliation or covering over something that is shameful. This is shameful.
I mean, there's so much actually in some of those Islamic hadiths and in the Quran where it can justify not just lying, but some of the most hideous forms of violence, you know, such as beheading and whatnot. But this whole idea of taqiyya, al-taqiyya, as you said, and deception, just, you know, I kept saying to people I was conversing with and people in church, guys, remember when this started. Remember what happened on October the 7th. Who invaded who attacked who took their women, their children, their babies, their elderly, the Holocaust survivors, and the world acts like Israel is the aggressor.
Yeah.
And then, for example, I mean, this was something, I think this was last year. You'll recall there was two young Israeli, a beautiful couple, engaged to be married, they were shot dead. Why? Because they lied, and it came out in the media. X amount of thousands of children will be dead within 48 hours because of starvation. From the word go. Even before Israel dropped bombs. They were saying genocide. They were saying that hospitals are being destroyed deliberately. And then, hang on, this was PIJ. This was Palestinian Islamic Jihad that bombed that hospital. Yeah. It was constant. It's a constant deception. And I think, my prayer is, and Israel does suffer the reproach of so many of these deliberately deceptive people, but I know that part of God's promise for Israel, for his people, is that he will remove the reproach of the nations, and the nations will see that God is with them. They'll see that, I think, in the future. We talk about Ezekiel 38, but they will see that God fights for Israel. He trains their arms for war. He's been with them. He's surrounded them, and he's been with them since October the 7th.
Oh, Hamas's unwillingness and inability to hand over, or inability. I think that everyone knows that they're able. They've been able. This is part of the whole situation. Their unwillingness to hand over the remaining 13 dead hostages has infuriated Israeli leaders who have accused the terror group of violating the peace deal. Hamas is now requesting heavy equipment in Gaza in order to move rubble and access the bodies. Egyptian teams have entered the Strip as well to help with the search. An IDF spokesman has said yesterday Hamas terrorists were filmed removing body remains from a prepared structure and reburying them nearby before summoning Red Cross representatives to stage a false discovery for photographers. Despite claiming difficulty locating the bodies of deceased hostages, Hamas continues to hold and manipulate the remains it refuses to release under the agreement. Hamas's claims of lacking engineering equipment are baseless. Such tools are unnecessary for the transfer of remains and do not prevent the return of the deceased hostages. One can envision a process wherein they intend to perhaps use the heavy machinery not only to remove rubble, but to try to resurrect their fractured, extensive tunnel system. But the reality is that as we have to remember, this is 1 month in from this ceasefire. There is another ceasefire that's been in place now for almost exactly a year, and that, of course, is the ceasefire that was made in relation to the conflict with Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. And that particular ceasefire is also under threat, as we've seen Israel forced to respond to the Lebanese government allowing, against the ceasefire agreement, Hezbollah to rearm. CBN has this very brief recap of some of these developments.
Israel had hoped for the return of another hostage's body. However, the Health Ministry's National Center of Forensic Medicine determined that the body is not one of the 13 who remain in Gaza, but additional remains of a hostage that's already been returned. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said this constitutes a clear violation of the agreement by the terrorist organization Hamas. It's now been a week since Hamas last turned over a hostage. Netanyahu will convene a meeting today to discuss Israel's response. Meanwhile, there's evidence that the Palestinian Authority, despite promises to reform, continues its pay-to-slay policy of paying terrorists who attacked Israel. Itamar Marcus from the watchdog group Palestinian Media Watch confirmed this. Payments proceeded as usual, and recipients confirmed receiving half their monthly stipends. This comes months after European leaders praised what they believed were reforms and pledged more than $230 million in new funding to the PA. Back in September, Netanyahu told Fox News that he did not expect the Palestinian Authority to change.
Pay for slay, they pay terrorists to murder Jews, and the more Jews they murder, the more the pay. If all of that is turned on its head, there's a tremendous transformation, well, good luck. Some people will believe it happens. I don't think it's going to happen.
Turkey's President Erdogan continues his push for a role in Gaza under a proposed international stabilization force. But Israeli leaders say no way, citing Erdogan's open defense of Hamas and his support for its leaders.
Erdogan led hostile approach against Israel, so it is not reasonable for us to let their armed forces enter to Gaza Strip.
Speaking from Air Force One, with President Trump at his side, Secretary of State Marco Rubio showed continued solidarity with Israel.
Israel didn't surrender its right to self-defense. Obviously, the ceasefire is based on obligations on both sides.
Even Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE oppose Erdogan's plan, fearing it would empower instead of disarm Hamas. In Qatar, there are revelations that the government's main spokesman has applauded past Palestinian terror attacks against Israel. Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The cessation of hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah was supposed to begin and did begin to some degree on the 27th of November of 2024, and yet we're seeing these pinpointed attacks on Hezbollah occurring specifically because of particular breaches in relation to that agreement. From that time, Lebanon was supposed to prevent Hezbollah and other armed groups from conducting operations against Israel, and Israel would not carry out any offensive military operations against targets in Lebanon by land, air, or sea under the ceasefire terms. Now, the recognition of UN Resolution 1701 was key here, with both parties recognizing the importance of this resolution, the same which ended the 2006 war, as the basis of stability while committing to its implementation without violation. Now, the deal does not negate the right of either side to self-defense consistent with international law. Lebanon was supposed to ensure that official military and security forces are the only entities authorized to carry arms in the southern area. The southern Litani area is referred to, and other non-state armed groups, including Hezbollah, were required to cease offensive operations, with any sale, supply, or production of arms or weapons-related material being under supervision by the government. Israel agreed with all of that, withdrew its forces, and trusted the Lebanese government and army to fulfill its role and responsibility. But while the deal was framed as a permanent cessation of hostilities, dependent on the implementation of that agreement, the issue is that the agreement has not been kept, and Hezbollah has been allowed to continue to recalibrate and rearm itself, seemingly unchecked, leading to the reignition, so to speak, of the fight against Hezbollah in South Lebanon.
That's right, and obviously this is always a fear with these ceasefires, is that they will just regroup. In fact, you saw recently Hamas was recalling their fighters. I think they managed to gather 7,000, which, by the way, tells you what an amazing job Israel did since October the 7th, that they've only gathered 7,000. But you'll see that they were straight away executing rival militias, and they were straight away putting fear back in the streets of the everyday Gazans. And
breaching ceasefire as well.
Exactly. That's a breach of the ceasefire. And so we have the same with Hezbollah. And you mentioned at the start of the program, which I think is so key, this is an important ceasefire. It's a time when there's been so much trauma. It's a time for Israel just to kind of like mourn and take that time, and for the Jewish people around the world. But, I mean, how can you have peace long term with groups that are devoted to your destruction? Cannot happen. I mean, there has to be essentially a full end, because they will constantly test, try and break. They will constantly try and rearm, regroup. We know this. This is a fact. Israel sees this. And Benjamin Netanyahu said recently, actually, that they're talking about and trying to convince the Americans to extend their control in Gaza, extend the territory they control, as well as extending their military themselves. After the airstrikes, they did manage to kill 30 Hamas fighters. They will be looking, I think long-term Israel will be looking to finish Hamas, Hezbollah, whatever that looks like. But as you mentioned, there will be constant breaches, constant pushing, and unfortunately the media doesn't see this, doesn't report this. No Jews, no news.
We've seen that continually throughout. Now, today, at the time of recording, is also a memorial for Yitzhak Rabin, and there's an event ongoing at the moment where President Isaac Herzog, who I was able to have the privilege to meet on my recent visit, has warned that the country is experiencing the same levels of incitement and violence as it was experiencing 30 years ago at the time of the assassination of its former Prime Minister. Herzog has said it's inconceivable that 30 years after Rabin's assassination, we still face such threatening violence within our society. This is a strategic threat in every sense. And as we're seeing unrest as well in relation, there are people who are unhappy with the hostage deal. There are people unhappy with conscription of Orthodox. There are people who are unhappy with how the war began. There's inquests. There are people who are, broadly speaking, there is a great deal of struggle at the moment internally that we need to pray into and pray that not only will Israel know peace from its enemies, but that Israel will know peace from within. I believe that peace can only truly come through recognizing its Messiah.
Absolutely. And as we bring this program to a conclusion, we remember that Jesus is the only hope for peace. Incredibly, some of the Israeli officials said the best thing that Gaza could have was Christians to come and share the gospel. This is a war. It's been a war of misinformation, a war of deception. We've seen that with the breaking and the breaches of the ceasefire. But we know that our God, great as the God of Israel, our God is in control. He protects his people. He's fought for his people incredibly. As Christians, we need to see that Israel's enemies, what drives them is the anti-Semitism. And we need to see that Israel's enemies are actually our enemies, and they hate what we stand for. They hate the message of the gospel. They hate God's people who brought the world the gospel. And this is a war that it's not about flesh and blood. This is a spiritual war for us as believers, and we need to pray into this particularly, and also speak out like you did. You've had conversations yourself, Regan. Israel's enemies do not need, these anti-Semitic enemies, they don't need Israel to respond or do anything. Actually, they'll still be on the streets. I'm involved in something where I want to go to, for example, Aston Villa, and I want to hold a sign saying that Christians stand with the Jewish people. Never again is now. Jewish people should not be barred from anywhere in our country. There should be no no-go zones. And as believers, I think that's so important that we stand and we're seen. These are massive moments. And when you look back at Nazi Germany, these are moments that are important moments to remember. And these are key times for us to pray. And thank you so much, Regan. Thank you for having me on this show as well, and for all your work and your amazing program in Jerusalem. And also to our viewers, God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And please, let's keep praying and keep our eyes on Jesus.